Welcome to the Compliance Officers Playbook podcast. We are launching into a deep dive today that I think cuts right to the heart of foundational risk management. If you're a compliance professional, you know this. You know that regulators, auditors, they're constantly looking at how your organization's risk strategy actually lines up with what you do day to day.
And that alignment, it so often snaps because of, well, just linguistic shortcuts. We see it all the time. The terms risk appetite and acceptable risk, they just get used as if they're synonyms, even by senior leaders.
Right.
But this blurring of the lines, it isn't just about semantics. It really creates these fundamental vulnerabilities in your whole risk architecture.
And that's really the core of our mission today, based on the material we gathered. We have to stop treating these terms like they're interchangeable.
They're not.
The distinction is absolutely vital. It's the difference between the board's strategic intent and the organization's operational tolerance. And that determines everything.
Everything. It dictates where your compliance resources go and, maybe more importantly, which critical risks actually get escalated to leadership for a real decision.
Get this wrong, and you could be spending millions to fix a risk the board would have been perfectly happy to accept.
Or, and this is far worse, you might unconsciously accept a catastrophic risk that the board never, ever intended to take on.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's start at the top with that intentional high-level concept, risk appetite. The material gave us this great analogy. It's simple. If appetite is how much you want to eat, risk appetite is the amount of risk the board is willing to accept to chase its goals. It's a proactive, strategic choice.
It's the compass setting. That's how I think of it. And it's not just one number. It's more of a defined range of risk-taking that an organization sees as essential to get where it wants to go.
Right.
I mean, when an organization is born or a new product launches, risk is just, it's part of the deal. You can't start a business without assuming some level of risk.
And this just blows up that whole myth of the zero risk mindset, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
The source was so clear on this. Aiming for zero risk is functionally impossible. It means you just stop doing business.
The example was so vivid. If you want zero risk, stay in bed all day.
And even then, you probably still have risks, huh?
Exactly. Risk appetite formalizes that trade-off. It's the organization putting a stake in the ground and saying, look, to achieve X, we have to be prepared to tolerate Y level of potential loss.
And that decision has to come from the governance body, from the board.
It has to. And it must be clearly linked back to the strategic goals. A properly designed risk management system has to start with this explicit statement of willingness.
When we talk about appetite, it's not just one big concept, though. It gets broken down into categories, right?
Oh, that's a key point. It's almost always segmented. You'll have an appetite for strategic risk, another for financial risk, operational compliance.
And for compliance folks, the appetite for regulatory risk is usually rock bottom.
It has to be. You might see a low compliance risk appetite. So zero tolerance for breaches, right next to a high market risk appetite, because that's how the company makes money.
And these are expressed qualitatively, like low or high, but they need numbers behind them.
They have to be. You need quantifiable metrics, things like maximum tolerable loss or the number of incidents you can live with. That's what makes it real.
So risk appetite is all about organizational agency. It's what we are willing to do to win.
It's the intent, and it is absolutely the responsibility of the highest level of governance to define it, to communicate it, and to own it.
Okay, perfect. So let's pivot from that high-level intent to ground-level execution. This brings us to acceptable risk. If appetite is the willingness, what's acceptance?
So now we're shifting from the philosophy to the practical threshold. Acceptable risk is the level of risk that an organization, after looking at it, analyzing it, decides it can be tolerated.
You can live with it.
You can live with it without taking immediate further action. It's the point where you basically say, okay, we've done enough here.
And here's the so what. This is what compliance teams have to internalize.
Yeah.
Because it's the critical point for managing resources. When a risk is deemed acceptable, it means formally that no additional controls are warranted.
That is the nexus point. That's where all the investment decisions happen. If a risk falls below that acceptable risk threshold, the organization has done a kind of cost-benefit analysis and decided.
What? That it's just not worth it.
Pretty much. That spending more time, more money, more people on it is just inefficient or unnecessary given the bigger picture, the overall risk appetite.
So acceptable risk is like a ceiling. If the risk is below the ceiling, you leave it. If it punches through the ceiling,
you have to act. Exactly. Think of it as your daily operational trigger. The appetite might set a big strategic range, like
Sure.
We want our operational losses to stay between 0.5% and 1.5% of revenue.
Okay, that's the appetite.
That's the appetite. But acceptable risk is the specific line in the sand for one single process. For example, a tolerance of, say, 3 data entry errors per quarter in trade settlement.
And if you hit 4...
You're outside the acceptable limit. Action is required.
Okay, this all sounds great in a textbook. But in the real world, doesn't every board say they have a low appetite for operational risk right up until a huge revenue opportunity comes along that requires taking on a ton of system risk?
You've just hit on precisely where the system fails.
So is acceptable risk just a moving target?
It shouldn't be. Those acceptable risk thresholds must be derived directly from the board's stated risk appetite. If market pressure is constantly forcing managers to accept risks that go way beyond the documented appetite, then you have one of 2 problems.
Which are?
Either the appetite statement is totally unrealistic and needs to be changed, or the organization is operating outside its approved mandate.
And that linkage is everything, isn't it? The risk appetite determines what becomes an acceptable risk.
Yes. If that link is broken or unstable, the entire risk structure it falters.
And this is where it gets really interesting. This was the aha moment for me in the sources we looked at. The main concern raised was that way too many organizations determine risk acceptance either consciously or unconsciously. And the fear is that most are doing it unconsciously.
That is the single biggest danger zone for any compliance professional, unconscious acceptance.
Why is it so dangerous?
Because when the organization hasn't clearly spelled out the board's true appetite, that intended level of risk, they are still accepting risks every single day.
Ow.
Simply by not putting in a control, by inaction. They're letting residual risk just sit there without any kind of executive sign-off.
So it's not a conscious choice to tolerate a specific risk. It's just they ran out of money or ignored it, and that inaction becomes the decision.
Precisely. That becomes the de facto acceptance. We see this all the time with, say, legacy IT systems. The risk of system failure is high, but replacing it is expensive.
So they just kick the can down the road.
Year after year, the risk is accepted through inaction. And if that risk is way outside the board's stated appetite, like a 50% chance of a catastrophic outage, but nobody ever brings it up because, we're managing, then the organization is flying blind. It's operating without a board-approved strategy.
Which raises a huge governance question. If the appetite isn't explicit, how can a manager in one department consistently define what's tolerable compared to a manager in another?
They can't. It's impossible. And you end up with completely inconsistent risk behavior.
For example?
The compliance team might set a really low acceptable threshold based on policy. At the same time, the business development team sets a really high one based purely on speed to market.
So both are tolerating risk.
But they're using totally different and often implicit benchmarks, and that just undermines the entire integrity of what should be a properly designed risk management system.
It sounds like without a strong, explicit risk appetite, the operational teams are basically setting the de facto appetite for the board.
That's often exactly what happens.
Just by deciding where to stop spending money on controls.
And that shift in authority is incredibly dangerous from a governance perspective. Risk appetite is a strategic decision. It belongs with the board, not with a line manager who's running out of budget in Q3.
Okay, so let's talk about the fix. The governance escalation path. This is how we force conscious acceptance, right?
It is the mechanism, yes.
So if a team finds a risk that is clearly above the defined acceptable risk threshold, what happens?
It becomes a decision point. It's no longer something that can be tolerated at the operational level. It has to be escalated up the chain.
And the material we saw confirmed this. Organizations would at least bring risks they do not think are acceptable up to the board level.
Yes, if it breaches that boundary, you need guidance. You can't just live with it anymore.
And this is where those higher level performance standards come in.
Exactly. The final backstop, the ultimate governance category, involves the formal acceptance of risks by the audit committee or the board. This is the moment the organization applies its full formal agency to a risk that fell outside the norm.
So when an unacceptable risk gets escalated, what can the audit committee actually do? It's not just a yes or no, is it?
No, not at all. It's a spectrum of conscious choices. First, they could just mandate mitigation, approve the budget to bring the risk back down below the acceptable threshold.
Okay, so fix it.
Or second, they could formally accept it, but with strings attached. They might impose really stringent monitoring and reporting, basically saying, we'll tolerate this, but we need real-time data on it.
So accept but watch it like a hawk.
Right. Or third, they could choose to avoid the risk entirely. Exit the market, stop the product line, whatever's causing the exposure.
But the key is,
The key is that the decision is now conscious, it's documented, and it's owned by the board, linking that specific operational risk right back to the strategic appetite.
so that governance structure is the practical enforcement tool. It prevents that slide into unconscious, undirected risk-taking.
It shifts acceptance from a dangerous default setting to a responsible, deliberate sign-off. And for you, the compliance professional, this mechanism is your shield.
How so?
Because it forces the highest level of the organization to own the decision when things go outside the lines. It lets you go to the business and say, this is unacceptable based on the board's own rules, so we need a conscious decision from them to proceed.
That's a powerful position to be in. So, to summarize the crucial distinction here today,
Let's do it.
risk appetite is what the board wants. It's the strategic willingness, the intent, the guardrails. Acceptable risk is what the organization tolerates on the ground. It's the operational line in the sand where you stop applying new controls.
And that distinction matters because appetite is broad and aspirational, but acceptance is specific, it's quantifiable, and it's tied directly to how you spend your money. Unconscious acceptance is just a failure waiting to happen.
Which leaves us with a final, provocative thought for you, our listener, to take away. We've talked a lot about the danger of implicit, unconscious risk-taking. So if risk appetite is truly the foundation for all of your risk management activity, ask yourself this. Is that foundation explicit, documented, and truly understood by everyone in your organization? Or is it merely implicit and assumed? Because if it's implicit, you are already unconsciously accepting risks you might not even realize you're taking. And those are always the ones that lead to the most severe consequences down the line. That's a wrap for today's episode. Thank you for your continued support as a paid subscriber of Compliance Officers Playbook podcast. It's truly what makes this show possible. Looking forward to sharing more with you soon.